All right, folks, we're going to get started in 1 more minute. All right, we're going to get started with the Fall Business Roundtable. I'll hand it over to Mayor Ward for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. It's Kevin Ward, Mayor of Hyattsville. I wanted to welcome you all to the Fall Business Roundtable, but also talk about the exciting week we have. It's Economic Development Week in the state of Maryland, and we have some terrific guests today that will be providing you an overview of the city's expansion and retention strategy. I'm just here to kick it off. I actually have to go run my own business right after this. So I do look forward to hearing from any and all of you. I will leave my email in the chat. It's pretty easy, but I love hearing from everyone really who has an interest in Hyattsville, but I look forward to hearing from you all and know that today it will be a great session for you all to take a look and get some information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
And folks, as with previous roundtables, if you have questions that come up through the presentation, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. We'll try to get to those questions as the speakers are hitting topics. If there's anything that we don't get to, we'll be able to get to at the end. Try not to repeat any questions and be as concise as you can so we understand the question and can respond accordingly. Amy, you want to handle introductions?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Amy. I'm the Community Economic Development Coordinator. So for today, we have a full schedule for you. We heard from the mayor already, and then we'll be going into our guest speaker, which is Biometrics and Access. As the mayor already shared with us, they did our business retention and expansion program or strategy, which I'm sure some of you have heard of, but you'll hear in much greater detail. Then we'll be going into some city updates that include the e-business grant, which is actually from the county. We have a speaker that will share a little bit more about that, as well as some COVID updates about our vaccination site, economic development programming, which includes Economic Development Week. The mayor gave a little bit of preview of that, some of our city grants and development updates. Sorry. So our business retention and expansion program, City Council secured biometrics and access with the goal of creating a toolkit of policies and programming, as well as strategies for servicing and expanding businesses and opportunities for business recovery. So this comes from the city acknowledging how important our local small businesses are to the vibrancy of our communities and everyday life here in Hyattsville. We want to do the best we can do to support those businesses as they expand and grow in our community and have them stay here in Hyattsville. So we'll be hearing from our two consultants, Heather Arnold, who's a founder and CEO of Biometrics, and also Bobby Boone, who is a founder and principal of And Access. They worked on the project together. And then now I hand it over to you guys. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Okay, once again, test of my electronics abilities. And there. Are we good? No. Okay. Hi, everybody. It is such a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I am joined by my friend and partner, Bobby Boone, who is in St. Louis. Bobby, you can click on so everybody can see your beautiful face, unless you're brushing your teeth.
No.
Bobby and I have been working together for, I think we determined 7 years. And we bring a really holistic approach to the idea of how do we not only support, but really scaffold retail and small office businesses whenever any kind of difficulty befalls an area. And if COVID doesn't qualify for that, I don't know what does. So we were really pleased with the timing of being able to reach out to the community. I think we spoke to many of you as part of our focus groups and roundtables. And we really look forward to getting your feedback on the things we're going to present today. The report itself is much more robust. And we really just wanted to take kind of the highlights and share those with you this morning, especially because I just saw your agenda and it is indeed packed full. So I'm just going to get started. I'm sure that any of you who know that if you are in the city of Hyattsville and you're located within a commercial property, there's a really great chance that you're located in one of these 3 districts. I wanted to point out that starting today, instead of referring to the light green area as Prince George's Plaza, we'll be referring to it as Hyattsville Crossing in honor of its new metro station name. One of the things I wanted to point out right from the start was that I look at this initiative from a market analysis perspective. And the first thing that would occur to any market analyst looking at your city is how can you fit so many distinctive commercial districts within such a small geography? And Bobby and I very quickly learned through our assessment of the inventory of properties in each of these areas that they actually coexist beautifully as part of what we would call a retail ecosystem, where Hyattsville Crossing is where most of your general merchandise shopping would happen. It's a logical place for a national larger box retailer to be. If I'm selling, something that is a specific type of wear that my biggest competitor might be e-commerce, that would probably be my bricks and mortar store in West Hyattsville. I'm a retailer or a business that's more appropriate for what we would consider neighborhood shopping. And at the Gateway Arts District, we're looking more at, from a retail perspective, food and specialty general merchandise, like art, as you would expect in an arts district. But that we also had a tremendous amount of professional office space in this area, and that we needed to be able to think about the 2 of them working in tandem and really being, in a way, in the most positive way, codependent on one another. So the first task that we undertook for each of the areas in the city as a whole was to conduct a SWOT analysis, or strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats assessment. And I just called out some of the sort of more what we would think of as aha moments that we grabbed onto real early in the process and realized that we needed to keep that thread for each of those districts as we went through the entire process. Perhaps most importantly, when we think of the city of Hyattsville, there is a district identity to that address that is, quite a few people use the word quirky. It's very creative, and that can go from, having a pottery studio to being, excellent at construction and repair. It didn't really limit itself to the selling of art in particular. That the customer base itself really did seek out small local businesses and really wanted to patronize their neighbors. One of the big conflicts within the area is that Hyattsville is suburban in its regional context. It's technically a suburb of DC, but it also has some urban mentalities to it that sometimes put it into a situation where it has internal conflict. And we wanted to be able to point those out, that the small businesses here had tons of potential, but needed some help, that we needed to think about increasing sales to those places, not in terms of trying to reach far and wide to bring people from Eastern Shore and Pennsylvania and Central Virginia, but that if we pursued a strategy that tried to increase sales from the local residents and make the local businesses more meaningful and purposeful to the local residents, that was actually a much more effective, easier, and sustainable way to improve local business long-term or longevity. And then finally, we wanted to be aware of the threat that in the course of trying to attract new businesses, we weren't actually making business more difficult for the people who are already there. Those apply to every district. Within the individual districts, Gateway Arts District has some very obvious advantages that I think we can all kind of get behind, it, if not intellectually, emotionally. Parking was called out as a major issue within the Arts District. What we aren't sure of at this point is how much of that is real or perceived. We also looked at the possibility for increased signage along Route 1, Baltimore Avenue, with the expectation that the volume of vehicles on that roadway actually is a problem for some of the retail businesses on the street because it creates a vehicle-heavy district, which is never particularly helpful to a retail or a small business opportunity district. But was there a way for us to take that disadvantage and turn it to an opportunity through some more interesting and more creative signage pursuits along Baltimore Avenue? And that from a threats perspective, you guys have really benefited for a long time with other Prince George's communities not quite reaching the same standard as an arts district. And they're all starting to kind of get it. And we wanted to make sure that we're protecting your place as one of those rare, historic, destination-worthy commercial areas. For Hyattsville Crossing, access is the name of the game in terms of the greatest strengths of the area. It also then becomes one of its weaknesses when you see how easily people are able to get there from a wide area. And in the course of doing so, it's, it's so popular, no one goes there is a little bit of the theme behind the access for the area. We see tremendous opportunity in some of the more recent turnover that's happened there that might give us some opportunities to create some development density within an area that's been very heavily office and retail in its orientation, to perhaps include even more residential development than is already happening there. With the vacancies or the under retailing at University Town Center, are there some innovative things that we could do with ground floor spaces? And then from a threats perspective, just staying really mindful of the fact that small businesses are always threatened by a concentration of criminal activity, and that we wanted to make sure that we're not only inadvertently creating a situation where the customer activity is threatened, but also where tenants don't want to go there either because of their concerns for safety. And then finally in West Hyattsville, we saw real opportunity here. We actually did a historic deep dive on all of these areas and found that West Hyattsville was the home to one of the first giant food stores, which was not surprising to us because it's such a natural fit for a neighborhood goods and services center. It's complemented by all of the regional access that you would find for a neighborhood goods and services center. But it has few opportunities for on-site demand, which is something that we're always really interested in. In Hyattsville Crossing, you have office workers creating on-site demand as you do in Gateway Arts District. Out here, you don't really have a lot of things that are creating on-site demand. You have to attract people from other areas. We saw an opportunity in attracting some national tenants to the area who specialize in neighborhood goods and services types of retail, which would be a dry cleaner, a pharmacy, any kind of a salon, that if we could find some opportunities that maybe would attract some national tenants, that we would be able to better support the locals that are there because of the higher profile of the tenant mix. Our biggest threat right now is that for a long time, we could sort of count on neighborhood goods and services being safe from an e-commerce threat, that the real threat was to general merchandise tenants. That's changing from COVID as neighborhood goods and services are finding ways to deliver groceries and to mail prescriptions. And so we just need to be mindful of that as we're counting on this area to sort of be the neighborhood engine of the community. Once we completed all of these, we went through and started looking at what were the strengths that we needed to preserve and the weaknesses that we needed to address and threats we needed to head off. And the opportunities were going to come out of our recommendations. So we separated our recommendations into 3 categories, mainly looking at them from a timeline perspective in being short-term, midterm, and long-term. I'm going to breeze through these real quick. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end, but I'll really encourage you to take a look at our report if this is something that you want to learn more about. All of the details are going to be in there. We really strongly recommended to our client team that they assign someone with the sole responsibility of being the small business administrator for the city. With the number of businesses that you have, the idea of having a single point of contact for communication and dealing with any unusual problems, like what is our mask requirement this week, or what is our status in a snowstorm, or any of these other small, just day-to-day details that people need to have. We wanted to see somebody in that role who woke up every day thinking about small businesses in Hyattsville. More importantly, perhaps, if someone qualified as a small business within the city, we wanted them to be notified that they were officially meeting the requirements of a small business and that they had someone in the Economic Development Agency who could, in fact, help them and was assigned to be a point of contact to them. Many of the businesses that we talked to said that they were struggling right now with workforce development. And it's a difficult place to be in Heightsville right now, just because on the negative side, the city itself doesn't have a workforce development program, but it sits within so many local, regional, and state programs that small business administrator and economic development in particular can provide all sorts of resources to businesses. But what was important was that we needed to have a communication system that allowed that information to be shared. I will note that Bobby and I have been reading every newsletter that comes out. We have participated in a few roundtables. The group is doing an amazing job right now, and we really appreciate the work that they're doing. One of the issues that you'll have in a city like Hyattsville in this particular situation is that there's so many different backgrounds, languages, ethnicities, levels of busyness of small business owners that they would really benefit from somebody who can have the time and the ability to tackle that communication system from as many different perspectives as possible, whether it be in-person visits, writing, emails, old-fashioned letters. It could run the gamut, but just trying to figure out how the best way to respond to and address and support those small businesses would be. The small business network idea is really an expansion of these roundtables and trying to give you all an opportunity to talk to one another, even without the formal intervention of the economic development team. And so what are the ways that we could create that type of environment for you, among which you might determine that there's someone who speaks for all of you. And I use an example from Austin, Texas all the time, where they have an independent business alliance there. And there was a woman who ran it for a long time who would go down to City Hall and would rail against things that were affecting her business. And they would just kind of blow her off and be like, okay, you know, you're just one business. And she created the business alliance. And then the next day went down and said, I represent 400 small businesses in Austin, and this is an issue for all of us. And the ability to represent a unified group of people like that within the context of your local county government, all of that can really be a very powerful thing. We also wanted to ask the city to take a moment to look at some of the costs that are being passed on to small businesses and reevaluate them, particularly under current situations and the amount of expenses that have had to have been incurred to adapt to recent changes in just the way of doing business. Each of the districts has a unique brand already. And what we were suggesting was that they be reinforced. And it almost establishes what we like to call rules of engagement for both tenants and customers, where if I'm thinking about what I need to do over the course of a week, and I realize that I need to go run errands on Saturday, I'm going to West Hyattsville. Oh man, I'm going to need to go pick up some school supplies for my kids. Okay, I'm going to Hyattsville Crossing. Oh, but I might go out to dinner with my husband that night, and we probably want to go check out, you know, a gallery or two. I'm going to Gateway Arts District. That it almost allows customers to know why they should be part of any given environment. But it also begins to be a message to potential tenants that this is where I belong, that when I'm in this environment, I'm going to attract customers who are in the mindset of patronizing my business when they're there. And this one was a kind of a big jumping off point for us when we realized how much apartment turnover happens in Hyattsville in the mid-August time period when student leases are turning over, in particular, students and staff and university employees who are down in this area. We saw this as a really great opportunity to establish an annual schedule where you're creating a printed directory of small businesses. It's super old fashioned. When we came up with the idea, we kind of couldn't believe it ourselves that we were recommending this, but it is it's a really good idea for this particular community to have businesses separated by district and something tangible that people can look at and see and know what surrounds them. It's kind of amazing to talk to people and be like, you know, did you realize that that bakery is just down the street? And they'll be like, actually, no, I never saw it. I never looked for it. I used to, you know, drive past it and go to Mount Rainier instead. So all of these things would factor into some kind of a printed directory. We then moved to the midterm recommendations, where you have some smaller businesses that probably don't need as much space as they do now. We're recommending that the Economic Development Authority promote a multi-tenant strategy, which basically says, do you have two tenants that attract a very similar type of customer that could coexist? And we've seen this strategy really effective in places across the country. One of my favorites is in Tampa, Florida, where a women's clothing store combined with a champagne bar. And that's a really obvious co-tenanting mix, but looking for opportunities to take the burden of having so much rental space off of one tenant and distributing the cost and really the customer draw opportunities among more than one retailer. We also think that you probably need a retail market analysis that would look at each district. I think of this a little bit like, you know, you're taking someone's temperature and blood pressure before you make a diagnosis. We actually don't know how much retail each of your districts can support. And the measurement of that support is how much money and sales can be captured there. And it's a detailed undertaking, but it's very helpful in figuring out what's an ideal mix and amount of retail in each of those locations, And what are the things that we can be avoiding in somehow undermining the success of those districts? Like, if we have a new project coming online, should we recommend 50,000 square feet of retail on the ground floor of the building? Or would we be better served if it was completely residential down to the ground floor? That's just one example. And we wanted to formalize a place management system for West Hyattsville, which is basically a group of people who come together who have commercial property interests that are trying to figure out the best way to promote things that happen outside of the four walls of each individual stores. So is it sidewalk improvements? It could be programming for the great big open parking lots when we're in downtimes. It's basically creating other reasons to be in and come to the district when someone's not there on a very purpose-driven trip. And then we wanted to find opportunities for a low rent for businesses that would require a low rent space. And this is a little bit more complicated, and I totally recommend that you read it in the report. But it basically says, you know, for property owners that have a pretty decent amount of rented market rate spaces, are there smaller spaces that could be leased out at a lower rent, especially to places like legacy businesses that have been there for 40 years and for some reason find that they are not able to continue to subsist in their existing conditions. And we've made some recommendations to the facade improvement program. We continue to have conversations about that, but mostly we found that people were not applying to the program because they had not even budgeted 50% of their costs in their next year's activities, and therefore just did not bother with the program. And were there other opportunities to have some kind of design intervention around that? And we really loved University of Maryland's Shuttle 113, which takes students down to the Gateway Arts District. We would really like to see that expanding with at least an additional stop in the Hyattsville crossing area. And with respect to parking, we are not parking professionals, so we were unable to really determine if the parking issue was a perception issue or a reality. And we really recommend that you bring in parking and transportation planning experts to determine if parking needs to be addressed as a physical issue, or if it's a signage issue, or if it's an awareness issue, before you take any substantive steps with respect to parking solutions. And then we had just a few long-term solutions, which was looking at 5 years out. In Hydesville Crossing, when Bobby and I were working on recommendations and the SWOT for that area, we really had a lot of difficulty coming up with ideas that were universally appropriate for both the mall at Prince George's and the University Town Center area. And we really think that there's a time coming in the not too distant future when we'll need to look at those as two different sub areas because they're just fundamentally different in terms of their parking structure, their physical structure, the types of tenants they'll be able to attract, types of tenants that they have that would be doing their on-site business activity. And so it might be time to separate those into two subsets. On the same vein, we needed to think about activating ground floor spaces in University Town Center. I can tell you two things about those spaces. The first is that there's too much ground floor retail space to be supported by on-site uses, and the actual reaching the site, how people park and engage with the retail spaces, and even the visibility of the retail spaces are so limited that it's difficult to attract customers from outside of the immediate area. And so you start to think about what those spaces need to be, and there needs to be less retail space there, would be our recommendation. And in doing so, it opens up your ground floor for things like creative office use. Anything that you could put in that space that would allow for transparency and activation to keep those sidewalks vital and vibrant, but would also create additional patrons for the retail businesses that should remain. And that goes back to a supply and demand issue, which we really don't know how much retail space that area can actually support. And then on Hyattsville Crossing, we just really recommend that you don't give up and that we continue to look for ways to balance pedestrian and vehicular circulation. It is one of the more complicated tasks for that particular area, and finding a solution that works for bikes and pedestrians and cars and actually metro trains as well is an important long-term investment that we really strongly encourage you to keep at. We know that you've never stopped working on that in that particular area, but keep up the good fight is our message there. And I hope that I got through that as quickly as you wanted me to, Amy. But we just really wanted to say thank you. And Bobby, I didn't really stop for a minute to breathe for you to interject anything. I just wanted to make sure that you didn't have anything you wanted to add. No, except that they've given us the most beautiful murals for all of our section delineation slides.
I think that's exactly right.
All right, everybody. So I know that you guys are our audience for the business retention and expansion strategy. So we really want to make sure that we hear from everybody who wants to join in the conversation. So the next part is us hearing from you about this strategy. That's going to be broken up into two parts. The first is some time for participants to ask some clarifying questions. Things like we just saw in the chat was a great example. Is it going to be available? Things like that. You can drop those questions in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand. And then the second part will be taking comments, which will be a little bit longer form. Participants can have up to 3 minutes. And then once everybody has a time to speak, if there's extra time and somebody wants to go again, we can do that, but we need to make sure that we get through the rest of the programming. All right, so I think that we did one question. You mentioned that the HVL is urban in some respects and suburban in others. What do you mean by that?
No, that's such a good question. So when we think about a suburban area, we usually, there's some physical attributes to it. You would have a customer base that would expect to be able to park for free on a surface lot as close as possible to the retail. In an urban environment, you don't really expect that as much. You might be more willing to park in a structure and pay. And you would just count that in the cost of your experience or your transaction. In an urban environment, you'll have buildings that are constructed to the sidewalk and a bunch of different businesses that share parking rather than there being assigned parking to each one. You would assume that you would be driving to a lot of places rather than walking to a lot of places. And there's parts of Hyattsville, I think West Hyattsville is probably the most suburban of, parts of West Hyattsville are the most suburban. But then you get like your great little historic, Art Deco shopping streets that are very modern and are much more urban. But they're one story, which is a little bit more suburban. So it's very typical for an area that's kind of on this edge of the ring around DC to continue to have those back and forth struggles. And I think that it's staying really mindful of how far you can push your customer base to urbanity, given that they have so many suburban points of competition that surround them, that to them will just feel easier. You just have to make it worth their while to deal with the urbanness.
All right, and then the next question we have from Erica, how many businesses did you talk to per area?
Mm-hmm.
Can jump in here. So we had two forms of engagement. One that was a survey that was released and that had a little over 35, I think 35, 37 businesses that actually completed it. And those findings were that really informed a lot of our one-on-one engagement. So we, continued to ask questions to, various business owners as well as other stakeholders. That list of business owners were more limited. I think it was around a handful, around 5 for business owners, but we also talked to property owners, different county staff members, as well as staff of the EDC, understanding kind of their programs and how they're deploying their resources. So I hope that answered your question.
And then we have another question also from Erica. Can you explain cross-property value exchange more?
Cross-property value exchange.
I think that was related to the University Town Center and Prince George's Plaza, if I'm not mistaken. Mall at Prince George's. Apologies.
What do you think I was talking about?
All right, I'll just chime in. So this is the candid Heather Bobby moments. Cross-property value exchange. So thinking about the retail landscape and how they are there's an ability for retail sales to go into many markets. However, when you're thinking about the mall and the University Town Center specifically, you can understand that there are strategies that will enable each of them to operate very successfully in tandem with one another. And so thinking in that is really demonstrating that shared value that's associated. And so what that shared value kind of looks like is, hey, I am going to the University Town Center for these types of experiences versus I'm going to the mall for a different shopping pattern. And so that ends up giving this cross-property value. And then you can also think about that, in an urban context as a, really having 2 different, property typologies in close proximity to one another, or, having, one property next to another where you are benefiting from that co-tenancy that Heather had mentioned. How do you, how does the wine bar and boutique benefit the establishment right next door, which could be a nail salon? So if you really have that cross property value being exchanged one over to the other, and so that really can support growth long term.
All right, next question comes from Mike Franklin. What is your definition of local? The Arts District depends on over 50% of our customers coming from outside Hyattsville.
I think that when we were talking about local, we really meant local businesses, not necessarily local clientele. And, please continue to draw customers regionally. What we're really focusing on there is how do we grow businesses? And we really do want to grow the amount of times and the amount of money that people locally are spending locally. So what we're trying to do is circumvent them going to New Carrollton or Silver Spring or Bowie or DC as part of their regular customer trip, and giving them clarity around the reasons to stay local.
Great. So I see the next question is from Jennifer. I feel like it's more of a longer discussion, so I'm going to hold that until we get to that portion. So the next question is from Erica. 5 business owners per area, the property owners are much of the problem in the city.
But that's true in every city. Property owners are the worst. I'm going to pull up the question. Can you repeat it, Erica? Just, guys, I'm so sorry. I'm like leaving you to go for a COVID test. My head is not working like it should be.
And Heather, I think it was less of a clarifying comment and more of a statement.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay. Excellent. I love those.
Okay. Let's see. Then the next one again from Jennifer. You mentioned a small business administrator that would update on mask updates and snow. We already get text alerts and emails on these topics. Can you explain a more substantive role in this person would take on to assist businesses and thrive and have a voice?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was being a little flippant and I'm sorry. It would be somebody who during COVID would be able to say, PPP loans are available through the following banks. If you bank with that bank, here's how you go about it. If you don't, here's what we would do instead. It would be somebody who could understand how changes in Prince George's County liquor laws might affect restaurant businesses within Hyattsville and how they need to be addressed locally. It could be somebody who is helping especially food businesses keep up to date with the most recent requirements for safety and bar management and food safety issues. There's just so much information that's passed between government agencies and small businesses that is day-to-day stuff. And sometimes the government agencies don't even realize that what they're putting forth has an impact on the small businesses within an area. And you guys have reached a density level that having somebody keep an eye on that and manage it is becoming critical for you to be able to stay on top of all of that.
All right. The next question is from an anonymous person. With respect to low rent options, can incoming developers be required or given incentives to provide such space? That's a little more of a suggestion, maybe.
Oh, it's a great question. It's something that I think the real estate world is still trying to grapple with a little bit. I think that the savvier developers realize that incorporating a percentage of small local businesses into their retail strategy, even if they have strong retail space that they can lease entirely to nationals, has value that exceeds just the rent that they're being given. That's actually becoming more and more popular. And I think that we're going to see more success of it being a market-driven strategy than something that's required as people realize that, being able to put something really interesting and cool in a ground floor space increases the value of the rental spaces above, whether it's for residential or for office workers. And that's where the real money to be made is improving the value of the space upstairs, just because it's, there's just more of it. I think that as we've come through this particularly weird time, property owners are becoming more and more engaged with their retailers in terms of realizing that they have to become partners with them in a lot of different ways. We are working on a couple of leases right now where it's not just a matter of a tenant signing a lease. It's basically the property owner saying, do I want to be in business with you? Because that's where this potentially goes if everything, goes to hell. And we've seen that happen. So we didn't think that would happen. So we need to prepare for a future that could go sideways without a whole lot of notice.
All right, so we have 10 more questions. We have 10 more minutes for clarifying questions and for comments. So I'm going to read out what's already in the chat, and then we'll go for a little bit long runs, but I want to make sure that everybody who hasn't asked a question has an opportunity. And then when we get to the longer comment section, people can raise their hands and then be unmuted, but that'll be 3 minutes for each person. All right, so the next question is from Caprice. Does this assessment and future plans take into the consideration retention and growth for service/B2B companies? If so, how?
It does include service businesses for sure. And honestly, what it's looking at are any businesses that are of a scale that what happens in Hyattsville has direct and primary influence on that business. So for example, I couldn't say, you know, well, I have this business in Hyattsville and I have this one in Loudoun County and I have this one up in Philadelphia. And so I can blend what happens between those three and it'll still be okay. So if I take a hit in Hyattsville, you know, hopefully I'll do as well in Philadelphia and Loudoun. What it's saying is any business that is of a size and an ownership that Hydesville is kind of their entire world, we need to think about that in terms of how do they get access to information? How do they get supported by the local community? And that can happen in a variety of different ways. We need to be thinking about all of them.
Right, the next question comes from Ken Carter. One of Hyattsville's major strengths is its bike paths and sidewalks. Our city slogan is a world within walking distance. 2 major bike paths will be connected by this time next year. You gave a very brief mention of bikes and pedestrians, mostly parking. How can we do better to capitalize in this major asset? If the 3 distinct districts, Hyattsville Crossing is not very bike friendly, thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's all really important. I think that it's a tremendous asset to have and to build upon. You know, with this idea of a suburban urban environment, you're going to always have to be mindful of the other ways of getting around. And the more that you can make biking convenient and fun and safe, the better all of those other things will be. I really do believe that probably the heart of your question needs to be put in front of a transportation planner who just has a better handle on the ability to balance different modes of transportation among these areas. It's a complicated question, but I applaud all efforts to make biking more possible here.
Thank you. The next question is from Anonymous. Who will convince developers on that point? I'm not sure now what point that was. Maybe they can clarify. There are so many vacant spaces that gives the impression that property owners do not have incentives.
No, I got it.
Okay.
I think that is a great point, and you know, something that that Bobby and I have thought about and worked on for a long time is at some point, are we going to have to start talking about an affordable retail program similar to affordable housing, where we are able to make up for the gap between the market and what the tenant can pay in some kind of additional subsidy. And I do think that we're coming around to ways for that to happen. I think something that's in the report that is definitely worthy of additional discussion in Hyattsville is how are you protecting your legacy businesses? And we consider legacy business to be, it can be a business that's been here for 10 years. It could be a business that's been here for 40 years. We've worked on businesses that have been around for generations, but really trying to provide them with the resources that they need in order to remain in an area that's on an upward swing. And I think one of the ways that we can get the development community on board with that is, quite frankly, there's been so much retail space that's been built that is difficult, if not impossible, to occupy. And that's true across the country. And so I think it's trying to manipulate the value of space on the open market, which just requires, honestly, a whole lot of education among property owners to say, you can continue to hold that space for $50 a square foot, or you can lease it today for $20. Let's have that conversation. And I do think actually that the real estate market is moving towards that model a little bit more aggressively than it had in the past, simply because it's becoming more and more common for tenants and property owners to sign shorter term leases, which means that they're willing to take a little bit more risk on on offering space for a lower cost. I also think retailers are becoming a little bit more flexible and movable than they had been in the past. They're a little bit more mobile. Unless you're Franklin's, then you're not mobile at all.
All right, so we have time for just a few more questions. But I just want to let you guys know, I'll be sharing this a little later. If you have more comments, we have set up a special BRE email. So you guys, we're going to make sure that we address everybody's comments, even if we don't have time to do them all as a group. So I'm just going to go through the questions that were already in the chat or already in the Q&A. Mike Franklin is asking, why no talk about the city doing marketing like other cities do?
Doing marketing like other cities do?
Yes.
Okay.
That was from Mike Franklin, if he wants to clarify that.
Sure. I can guess in lieu of him jumping in, but he should totally jump in if he would like to. We did recommend some marketing initiatives. I'm not sure exactly what other types of cities he's talking about. Oh, are you there? Hi, Mr. Franklin. I see his little hand raised.
Yeah, can you unmute him?
Okay. Hi.
Oh, here he is.
Mike should be able to talk now.
If you want me to clarify, just point of information, just even look at all of the Main Street Maryland cities where there's a tremendous amount of marketing on their website and directing to CDCs or other organizations to show, having visitors buttons being focused towards visitors. There's that involves street signage and lots of other things, lots of infrastructure things. The city doesn't view itself that way, I don't think. But even if it does, it could be, I think there's a lot more that can be done along those lines than is being done now. So I was surprised that that wasn't one of your major recommendations.
Sure, I understand that. I think it's a matter of resources partially, Mr. Franklin, in terms of what is the best use of limited resources in terms of time and money. I also think that, there's a couple of strategies around what is the correlation between marketing money spent and improved expansion and retention. And that's a very difficult correlation to prove. So we did include some marketing initiatives that are very targeted and very specific. I'm not of a mindset to encourage a tremendous amount of money to be spent on a very visual marketing strategy. I think that it would have been, I think the work that we did, I think it would have been undermined by something like that, quite frankly. And it's not to say that I don't think those things should happen. We just wanted to make sure that we were giving you some foundational elements rather than just getting away easy and saying, do a lot of marketing.
All right, so real quick, I want to get to Jennifer's question because she's been waiting a while, and then wrap up with the anonymous question. So Jennifer is asking, in regards to ideal amount of retail in Arts District, this is a pressing question as new mixed-use development is planned for space across from Yes Market and Streetcar 82. How will this be assessed and how quickly? There's a huge concern among small business owners that it will be corporate stores only and will place economic stress on local small businesses and create further vacancies.
It's a great point. And it's something that we struggled with all along the way because we kept finding ourselves wanting to do a retail market analysis and we were not contracted to do that. I do think that it's something that the community will benefit from tremendously. But I'll tell you that just from the location of that property on Baltimore Avenue, it probably should have a ground floor that's available for retail space, because empirically and historically, and just from a planning perspective, it's where you would find retail locations. I think that the right balance is the question. And what you would hope to see is that they would attract tenants that would further reinforce the arts district and attract people with greater frequency than it does now to increase exposure to the other retail spaces that are there. But I do think it requires a comprehensive retail approach. And I'll be sending a couple of names to Jim and Amy for people who they might consider for doing that kind of retail planning work.
Great. Last question, what is your biggest takeaway that you think will help the city?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think that this is going to sound so silly and trite, but I want them to start treating each of the districts as a different entity. And increasingly, we saw across the board that a Hyattsville strategy wasn't going to work, and that there were very few things that you could apply to the city as a whole. And so there are times when Hyattsville Crossing feels like they're being overshadowed by attention being paid to Gateway Arts District, and West Hyattsville feels left out altogether. It almost started to feel like children fighting for attention, not to condescend to them in any way. But each one of them needs different things, very specific approaches and assistance. And I think it's very easy to look at Hyattsville and say, it's such a small city, you can kind of handle things with one stroke of a pen. It's not. It's actually an incredibly complicated place. And if we think of it more like a delicate ecosystem, I think that it will be more successful because you're going to actually meet these districts where they are. And even more appropriately, I think it's important to remember that customers who are traveling through the area, they don't know when they've entered Hyattsville and when they've left. And so our hyper awareness of it needs to be translated into how do we create these special spaces that benefit Hyattsville, regardless of where our customers travel through or from. So that's probably my biggest takeaway.
Great, thank you. That was a great wrap up. As I said down below in the chat, I put the email address that anybody can use, even if somebody else in the business community wasn't here today, they can still submit their comments and questions. It's bre@hyattsville.org, so it's pretty easy to remember. Yeah, so we look forward to the publication of that so everybody can see and comment on it. So thank you, Heather and Bobby.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for bringing us on and let us think about this.
So the next part, we'll go back to the rest of our programming for our city updates. And we actually have one more guest speaker. Sorry, one second. Sorry, I can't get this menu to go away so that I can open up my presentation. Okay, so I got it. So this section will be the city updates. We'll first hear from Alicia about the e-business grant. Then we'll go into some COVID updates, some information about the city's economic development programming, and then the development update. So take it away, Alicia. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to participate. Alicia Moran, Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation. Love Hyattsville and all you do, so thank you, Jim, and the team there for doing a great job, and welcome new Mayor Kevin Ward. Just wanted to give everybody an update. The Personal Services e-business grant has reopened. This is relief money that has been provided to the county, and we are providing $5,000 grants to establish businesses to expand their technical capabilities. The application period is open now. It's open through November 5th. And so what does this really mean? You must have a physical location in Prince George's County. You must be an established business and still be in operation. You must have been in business since March 9th of 2020. And e-businesses, there are a variety of codes. I encourage you to look at the PGC EDC website. The list of businesses has been expanded. So again, we're talking about beauty salons, nail salons, personal care services, online travel agencies, wedding planners, a host of other businesses. So there are NAICS codes that are listed in the application portal, which I'll put the link in the chat so that others have that if they need it directly. But you can also get through through the notice on the page here. I would just say that tell your story. The grants are supposed to help people gain new business, right? So it's digital marketing, updating your website to encourage more traffic, more foot traffic to your business, or e-commerce traffic. So think about that as you're applying for the grant, if you would. And I think that's it for me. I'll keep it short and brief. I just want to thank you all for allowing me to participate. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Alicia. That was great. We'll go back into some more Hyattsville specific things. So if you haven't gotten your COVID vaccine and you're interested, you can head to the city's vaccine site, which is at the First Methodist Church at 6211 Belcrest Road here in Hyattsville. Everybody over 12 is eligible. If you would like an appointment, there are appointments available on Tuesdays, but also some walk-in hours throughout the week, and you can give them a call ahead of time for availability. You can use that link down below if you want to get more information. But if Greenville Metro Station Community Clinic is closer to you, or if you're interested in Johnson & Johnson, you can head over there. They also have availability every day of the week. So as we mentioned before, this week is Economic Development Week. This is a statewide program that's run by the state of Maryland. Every participating municipality in our state at the last week of October participates in the program with a week of events. So for us, we're starting off the week with the Economic Development Report, Business Highlights. We're right in the middle here with the Business Roundtable, the Development Spotlight, and Certificates of Recognition. This week is meant to emphasize the importance of economic development on our state and our communities, bringing vibrancy, tax base, jobs, and overall growth. So the Economic Development Report, I'm sure a lot of you guys are already familiar with this. It comes out twice a year in the fall and spring. This time we focused on the Community Sustainability Plan because it's a 5-year anniversary to bring our community up to the highest sustainability standards. If you'd like to view that, you might have gotten in your Life and Time circulation if you're a resident, or you can also use the link down below. And all of these links that I'm talking about today, we'll send out an email that has them all specifically, so you don't have to worry about grabbing them at this moment. So that's Monday. And then on Tuesday, we had an event honoring our very own Ken Carter at Maryland Meadworks with a certificate of recognition and proclamation from our mayor, but also Alicia Moran, who you just heard from, presented him with a certificate from the county executive and the Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation for his commitment to our city during these hard times in business, and for his ability to utilize the CFI and CPI grants as well as COVID grants, and able to help sustain his business as one of the industry leaders in the nation for Weedworks. And then we have today the Business Roundtable. Thursday is a tour of the Kaiser Permanente expansion. So City staff starting at 10 a.m. will be given a hard hat tour of the new expansion, the active construction site, to see how the building is helpful to bring healthcare to our city in a walkable, accessible way. And that will be broadcasted on Facebook Live at 10 a.m. Thursday. And then on Friday, we have more certificates of recognition for other businesses that showed exemplary innovation and sustainability throughout COVID. This included Three Little Birds, Liberty Life Care, and Red Onion. That rounds out the week. And then we just wanted to give you guys an update about the city grants that we have. So you're probably already familiar with the Cfi grant. I know a lot of people in this room have received it in the past. We had 3 businesses awarded this funding in this round. And as you know, it's every year, a business can get one more than once. So if you're interested in next year, go ahead and apply, look up the application. And just as a review, this is a matching grant 50-50 with the city and equity from the business. And it can be used for facade improvements like awnings, paintings, lightings, things like that. And then the corridor investment program is another one of our staples. We had a great crop of businesses being awarded this grant this time. City Council just approved the grants, and draft contracts will be coming soon. So if you see your name in there, just look out for that coming via email in the next few weeks. So this grant can be used for a variety of different things. If you aren't familiar, it can be used for programming. So an event that that's free to the community and involves other businesses. You can get $1,500 from the city, or for business development, things like consultant work, new websites, marketing, things like that. You can be awarded $5,000, or for placemaking grants, which is similar to facade improvement, but on a smaller scale. This can be things like planters and some lighting, things like that. The maximum amount is $2,500. The city matches 80% of the project cost, so that's pretty good. And again, another round will open up next year, and I'll be sure to drop the links for both information on both of those in the chat. And next we'll be hearing about development going on in the city.
Good morning again, everyone. So I know some of the folks have been interested in the Rhode Island Avenue Trolley Trail and came up during the BRE presentation. Those who are not familiar with the Trolley Trail, about a decade ago, the trail was extended along the CSX line, terminates just south of Franklin's. So that was phase 1 of the project. For the past several years, the city's been working with Maryland State Highway Administration and Park and Planning to continue the trail and fill out the missing link, which would connect the trail into the Northwest Branch trail system. For a variety of reasons, there were delays in getting the project off the ground. Fortunately, the construction project was bid out in September by State Highway. Bids are going to be due back to State Highway in the middle of November, provided all goes well with getting contracts assigned. We anticipate a notice to proceed, which allows the selected contractor to move forward with construction, starting sometime early in 2022. It's a lengthy process for construction, even though it's effectively a sidewalk that's not very long. Somewhere between 16 and 18 months is the anticipated project schedule, which would have the project finishing up towards the end of 2023. There will be some temporary road realignment. So the northbound lane on Rhode Island Avenue during certain phases of the project will be closed, and it'll push the traffic into the southbound lane both for north and southbound vehicles. The advantage of this is it knocks almost 2 months off the project schedule. So it'll get delivered much quicker than if both lanes were open and folks contractor had to work around some of the traffic controls. As part of this improvement, it is a separate project, but for the general public, it will look as part of one cohesive project. The missing sidewalk on the west side of Rhode Island Avenue will be constructed as the Rhode Island Avenue project is starting to wrap up. Obviously, in order to maintain roadways and circulation, it all can't be done at once, but we would expect sometime summer, fall 23, the sidewalk on the west side of that section would also be constructed. And so certainly improve the pedestrian walkability and bike walkability within that area. And certainly the connection to the Northwest Branch Trail system is going to be extremely beneficial for our residents and businesses. Going over to the next project, and I know many folks are familiar with the buildings on Baltimore Avenue that Green Owl designed, helped facilitate a couple of years ago. The property owner is preparing to mobilize, and so that will include knocking down the existing structures with site development. Their project schedule has still not been solidified. We are anticipating sometime in December for them to start breaking ground. We're tentatively scheduling a groundbreaking for November. I would anticipate there would be some gap between a groundbreaking ceremony and when you see the site being really active for demolition. The site is scheduled to include approximately 284 apartments and roughly 30,000 square feet in retail space. Again, we'll see how it goes. This is a project that has languished for at least 2 years for a variety of reasons, but we do anticipate them kicking off sometime shortly. Taylor Roby, our new city planner, is going to talk you through Riverfront in West Hyattsville. It's a project that started with one segment, is transitioning over to a separate phase.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk through some of the development happening at Riverfront at West Hyattsville. Currently, the townhome community, which is shown on the left, is under construction, and when complete, will include about 183 townhomes. The multifamily portion of the development, which is closer to the West Hyattsville Metro Station, will be happening in 2 phases with one multifamily building in each phase. Phase 1 is currently under review, and we're anticipating it will include 291 multifamily units, just over 3,000 square feet of retail, and about 300 parking spaces. Phase 2, which also will include multifamily units and a retail component, will be happening at a later date, but we're excited about this project and the progress. We're expecting delivery in fall of 2023.
All right, everyone, thanks so much for your participation. We have a few minutes left, but that's the end of what we plan to share here today. So if anyone has anything last minute, we're here.
There's a question in the chat, I guess it's a clarifying question for Baltimore Avenue. So the project, the Rhode Island Avenue project on the east side will tie into the existing sidewalks and trails along Charles Armentrout. The sidewalk on the east side will not extend any further than that point. I think that, if I understand correctly, that's the question that's being posed. There will be a rather expansive crosswalk at that intersection. As anyone who's ever tried to drive or walk or bike that intersection, obviously it is not the safest intersection. And so the vast majority of costs are actually related to the improvement of that intersection to make it a little bit safer, clarify who belongs where in terms of vehicles, motorized vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians. It will it will be, I think the biggest disruption in terms of short term during construction, but once it's complete, it will be much safer for those who are having to traverse that intersection. Two other things. One wanted to mention, had a question about Shop Hyattsville for the holidays. Programming wise, we're still waiting for the schedule, but in terms of parking, we intend, as we've done previous years, Thanksgiving through, I have to look at a calendar, but I think it's January 5th, we'll provide free parking in the city's lots. We expect to have that information out around the third week of November, once everything is finalized. That's about the time Public Works will be putting out holiday lights, again, around November 15th through Thanksgiving. But if you have any questions with that, if you don't want to send that to BRE, you can send it to myself or Director Riddle, and we can enter our emails into the chat in case anybody needs it. I was trying to think of if there was any other questions that came up. Oh, there was a question about lighting. I think if Eric is still on here, about lighting on Baltimore Avenue. So that was submitted to PEPCO yesterday. There is roughly a 10 to 15 day calendar turnaround on lighting replacements if bulbs are burnt out. If it's done sooner, that would be terrific. That's generally the timeline it takes for PEPCO to turn around work orders. But certainly we'll keep everyone apprised as they schedule the work and come out to take any of the corrective actions. Hey, Eric. All right, well, I'll just close out quickly. We intend to post the BRE strategy on the city's website on Monday. We'll post this meeting for anybody who's not was not able to attend if they have any questions. The report will go to the City Council at its second meeting in November for a briefing. I'm sure the City Council will have a variety of questions, not dissimilar to some of what was brought up today. And again, I think certainly appreciative of both Heather and Bobby's work on this. You know, I was asked early on sort of what's my expectation, and my expectation is everybody is 70% happy with what's included. You know, certainly from my perspective, I think there's recommendations here that are actionable, require resources and some thought about approach. I certainly don't expect everyone to agree with everything that's in the report, but I think certainly there's some information that we can cull out of this that that changes perspective on how we approach facilitating the health of small businesses in the city. And so that was the overarching goal, and certainly Bobby and Heather are appreciative of the work, the transparency, and ensuring that what you delivered is both scalable and actionable for this community. So thank you both for your guidance and professional guidance and thoughtfulness in crafting this. So thank you.
Nope, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, with that, we'll sign off. Thank you for everyone for attending. Amy will follow up with the links and the report that we'll post to the website. So if you have any questions, please feel free to follow up BRE@hyattsville.org. Thank you very much.